Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Mariyama, Chair of Livable Raleigh, and I would like to welcome all of you this evening to the first Livable Raleigh Community Conversation of 2022. Did you know that the Raleigh City election is going to be held on November 8th, 2022? As we head into this next city election, Livable Raleigh plans to host more community conversations focused on the key issues that matter the most to the people of Raleigh. We hope you will help us tonight by identifying some of those key issues. Tonight, Livable Raleigh wants to hear from you. This is your opportunity to let us know what concerns you most about the quality of your life here in Raleigh today and what your concerns are for the future of Raleigh. Tonight, we are here to listen to you. Let me take a moment to review how you can participate tonight. You can use the raised hand icon in the Zoom dashboard. Just click reactions and you will see this feature to raise and lower your hand icon. We will do our best to recognize you in the order in which your hand is raised. Or if you would prefer, you can just type the word stack in chat and you will be recognized to speak when it is your turn. Or you can type your comment or question in chat and these will be forwarded to the host. There have been some comments submitted this past week to the Livable Raleigh email address for tonight's meeting, and we will be sharing those with you throughout the evening. A couple of housekeeping matters. All microphones will remain on mute until you are called to speak. This meeting is being recorded. Mike Lindsay will be your host tonight. Mike is chair of the Hillsborough Wade CAC and a member of the Livable Raleigh Advisory Committee. He has lived in Cameron Park neighborhood since 1984. He is active in neighborhood issues and city politics. Wanda Hunter will be managing the chat tonight. Wanda is a member of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition and is also a member of the Livable Raleigh Advisory Committee. Wanda is a native of Raleigh and lives in East College Park. She is a tireless advocate for those in need. She is active in her community and city politics. And now it is my pleasure to turn this meeting over to Mike Lindsay and Wanda Hunter.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And this program is really your program. We want to hear from you. We have a lot of ideas, and I'm sure some of us will express those, but we really want to hear from you. If you want to raise your hand using the icon that's in the Zoom interface, that would be great. That's the best way for us to see you. As Wanda has said, you could type in stack into the chat box. So let's get rolling. And if we don't see anything soon, I'll start with some of our pre-submitted questions or observations. Okay, I don't see anything, so here goes. As a native of Raleigh, I've been concerned for many years how our city leaders give so much power and land to developers who have no regard for existing neighborhoods, buildings, green space, etc. No one wants to turn our city into the next Atlanta except developers and investors, the majority of whom do not live here. So, anybody want to respond to that? Anybody feel that way? Think that's wrong? Somebody says they agree. Okay, we have Shane Collins. Shane, you want to unmute yourself? Okay, Shane, I'm going to go on to Steffi next.
I'm sorry.
Shane, you're there. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I wasn't sure how to unmute myself. I'm sorry. I spoke before City Council on the text changes, and as to reaching out to City Council, I didn't know the protocol. I didn't know what's acceptable, but I would like to encourage the CACs in the city. I've got a few CACs. A list was provided to me of different chairs of different CACs that are still in existence. But would it be acceptable to post my little talk that I gave to City Council? Would it be okay to post that to the CACs to encourage them, along with the City Council emails and the Planning Commission emails, to encourage people just to send a note in with their thoughts on the text changes that would involve the two that I'm speaking of, are the text changes involving no parking restrictions and involving the text change 1221 that would allow accessory commercial units in backyards with very little restrictions.
Yeah, Shane, speaking as the chair of the Hillsborough Way, I would say yes. If you can get me your comments or a video, I will put it on our Facebook page.
Okay, great. I haven't done it yet. I've got a list, a partial list of some of the CACs. So I'll send out notes or emails to those people. I'm not sure if I have Hillsborough, but I probably do. If I don't, I'll reach back out.
Shane, I'll message you in the chat with my email address.
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank
Betsy?
I might actually we had Stephanie was next.
I'm sorry, what, Wanda?
Stephanie was next.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. I had lowered my hand because I thought I was going to speak. So I just want to piggyback on this primary concern about developer influence and in the community. And the concern that I have, I just want to maybe deepen it a little bit. The concern I have not only is the developer undue influence that it has over the overriding political and economic drivers here in the city of Raleigh in terms of their expansion, but the concern that I have is also the dissemination of historic neighborhoods in our city, that this developer predomination and the influence that it's having is outsiders coming in and dictating not only policies that are disseminating important historic communities that we have, which is really kind of is breaking down the historical value of our city. That's the biggest concern that I have about it. But the other concern that I also have is that there have been a lot of planning protections put in place over the last 15 years that are being ignored and overridden, and with people ignoring them and kind of shoving them under the carpet. And so a growing concern for me is that we are not, as a group and as a community, opposing those forces. We are not doing our job enough to all come out in droves at the ballot box and really paying attention to who's running and holding their feet to the fire, not once they're elected, but holding their feet to the fire during the electoral process and the campaigning process to expose them, and doing our homework to make sure that these folks are being held up with transparency so that the community they are elected to serve are being given information that will allow us to engage in more transparent and thoughtful election processes. So it's kind of like, I guess, a sub thing of the concern about the influence of these developers. But the concern, the overriding concern I have is that the structure, the historic nature, and the internal kind of spirit of our city that makes our city a valuable place to live is getting weakened and jeopardized, and that's the big concern that I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Steffi. I think one of the things you were referring to are like honoring and respecting small area plans, stuff like that, right?
That
Okay.
would be correct. And also there's a Hillsborough Street plan that Russ Stevenson was part of creating many more years before the small area plan that's also gotten shredded. So they're just examples, but this is happening historically now over the last 10 years, like every day.
Okay. All right, Betsy, you have your hand. Do you want to unmute yourself?
I did. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a longtime Raleighite, lived here since I was 5 and I'm 73. Grew up in the Five Points area and participated in that CAC when they tried to build a multi-story facility on the old Hayes Barton Pool property. And we were able to work with the developer to keep that at a neighborhood friendly 2-story, looks like other houses in the neighborhood development, and it integrated very nicely. And I now live in North Raleigh, and I'm part of the North Raleigh CAC, or the Midtown area, Quill Hollow, and have been participating in that for years with y'all and been to city meetings and so forth. And my concern is that we're now getting a real, as everybody knows, the huge development around North Hills. We've got wind tunnels going on. We've got major city impacts going on. And during this pandemic, my husband and I have stayed sane by walking beautiful greenways and all the different places and parks that we have in Raleigh. And I want the city to know that I applaud them for that. That's kept us sane. It's kept a lot of people sane and safe. And I hope as we approach, if we have to live with these multi-story facilities, that we approach blending in and building in parks and recreations every step of the way. I've been following the parks plan. I like the idea of a lazy river. At some point, I like the 2 bridges that are being planned, uniting the Six Forks Road area to the North Hills Plaza area, and also the area near the Wake Tech further down off of Rush Street. I applaud the city in planning that type of intervention to get us to be connected. I am, however, very concerned at the Montecito Apartments demise. It is a gorgeous piece of property with lots and lots of trees. And I just hate to think the proposal of 5-story apartments just becoming a apartmentscape with no trees will be just a travesty to our neighborhood. I would like to see the developers put some impact in our neighborhood parks, such as Eastgate Park, which has fallen by the wayside. And I would like to see them invest in that, so the people they're bringing in to live in our neighborhood would also benefit from that. So I'd like the city to think, could there be a tax? Could there be some kind of like, okay, you're here, you're bringing 3,600 people in on St. Albans. Besides the impact for traffic, let's have the impact for parks, and let's let them help us build a more beautiful park system for our neighbors to use. And as we get to know each other. The other park comment that I have is I've been on several OLLI, Osher Lifelong Learning programs, where there's a proposal thought of bringing together all the parks on the east side of Western Boulevard, Martin Luther King, bringing those parks, which are now occupied by Central Prison and the School for the Blind and Pullen Park, and reuniting them with the water supply that was there naturally that's been covered up, and make that all one great big park area. And I would want the city to consider that as a possible future many years down the road. But I'd like the city, the Dick's property is so gorgeous, and I'd like us to continue to think how we integrate parks into our city. Those are my comments.
Betsy, I love your vision on the park connectivity. I have a question that goes back to what you first start off with about a pool and a site that got developed into scalable, appropriate scale townhomes.
Yes.
For the other folks on here, that was right next to Wade Avenue. Is that correct?
It was yeah, right across from the house I grew up in on Scale Street, and that was the Hayes Barton pool. And York Properties took it over with the leadership of Settle Dockery meeting with us and the 5 Points CAC. I acted under my mother's proxy, who had dementia at the time, and we were able to negotiate with them. They wanted to put a major apartment building, kind of like Capitol Towers there. And we were able to work with the city and with the planners and ask them to keep it as neighborhood friendly as possible, and to keep it with some park area. You notice there are a few park areas there, and to also the style of it just being 2-story versus many, many stories, which was what the original plan was. So we were successful in negotiating that.
And that was done through your CAC?
Yeah, that was done with our CAC meeting with the planners, the city planners. And I spoke at that meeting, and I remember them saying, well, you've got office and industrial across Wade Avenue. And I was able to make the point that Wade Avenue acts as a major thoroughfare, and it's not congruent. You know, oftentimes if you have office and industrial touching a property, then the city will say, oh, well, it's already O&I. And we said, no, it's not, because that Wade Avenue acts as a major barrier for anybody. And we're still on this side of the neighborhood. And so they agreed with us on that. So that did not hold water. That was York's argument, is that right immediately across the street, there was the lab for the state lab for doing rabies testing and stuff like that. So it's office and industrial on Cole Street. So that was our argument that I was able to propose to them. Yeah, and it went and it worked. So it's like, give them a plausible way to make this work. And that's what I'm saying about the Montecito. If anybody drives through there, that is a major big area. And to think that all those gorgeous trees that are in there are just going to be decimated, just like everything else that's being decimated on St. Albans. We really need to think about the environmental impact. And we also need to think about the people that are going to be living there. Wouldn't they like to see some trees rather than seeing the belt line? I would.
All right. Okay, thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
And,
Okay, Helen? Sorry, Wanda?
oh, yeah. Christina had her hand up, but she put it down. I didn't know if she still wanted to speak or not.
Thank you so much, Wanda. I was just referencing what Shane was talking about, and I just put it in the chat, so I don't need to speak, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, Wanda, are we okay to go to Helen next?
Sure are. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, I am another longtime resident of Raleigh. Got here in '75, bought my house in '89. And what worries me almost more than the major development, because I understand the need for density, and I agree with density where it is appropriate, like downtown. But what I see and am so concerned about is the existing neighborhoods that are being overtaken. Mine is an example. I live near the corner of Glasscock and Brookside, and living in 780 square feet. And those houses are being torn down right and left. and put up, replaced with what we call McMansions. And that is something that concerns me more than the big developers. It's all the small developers that like Betsy was saying, don't look at the neighborhood and don't respect the neighborhood. And I think that the city council ADUs, giving people the ability to do that would be fine if they would insist that the ADUs are affordable housing. But that's not what's happening, and that's not what's going to happen. But I see the different neighborhoods becoming just the same thing over and over again. These 2-story, 2,000 square foot, 4,000 and 2 million square foot mansions right next to people who are not able to grow things in their backyard anymore. It is something that I wish I knew an answer to, but that's what concerns me, because my little neighborhood is precious to me, and it is just heartbreaking to not be able to do anything to save it. Thank you.
Helen, what's the name of your neighborhood?
It is called Capitol Heights. That's what it says on the deed, but it's never really been organized per se, because everybody who lives there are too busy making a living,
Right.
to worry about organizing things and trying. We did a little bit. We managed, there's on the corner of Glasscock and Brookside, there is a wonderful little commercial development that back in the 90s, we got together and worked with the developer and insisted that they put residential on the commercial development. And it's, we now have a little market, a coffee shop, a cute little curio shop, a gift shop. And at that point, a lot of people wanted to call it Oakwood Park because the streets surround Oakwood Park, which is where the Oakwood Dog Park is. That the dog park was a big plus for the neighborhood and has basically saved that park from being crime ridden. It that and having the that healthy commercial area.
Helen, I think I've walked by that development you're talking about. That is a nice infill, I believe. What they did there was very appropriate and provided amenities for your neighborhood. Do you know what your CAC is?
It was in North Central CAC, but it's right beside Mordecai CAC.
Okay.
North Central has is no longer active that I can find anyway.
Yeah, because I mean,
And
what you described with people being busy, and if you're a small neighborhood and you're not organized, that's one of the advantages of being in a CAC, because you have other
Exactly.
people that can help you communicate and work on different issues that you think are important. So we'll try to figure out what we can do to help you beyond just your neighborhood. But you know, I'm fortunate to live in Cameron Park that has a very strong neighborhood community organization. But like you were saying, a lot of smaller neighborhoods don't have that, and they're left hanging out there without a larger organization that they can be involved with. So I appreciate what you're saying and what you've been dealing with.
yeah, it is, we really looked up with that development, and the man that owns it now is he really cares about the getting a good mix of businesses in there that will support the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love North Central CAC, and it breaks my heart that it's gone now, and that Octavia doesn't seem to have the energy, I think, now to fight back to a CAC without the help of the city.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Helen, all I got to say is thank God you had a caring developer who wanted to improve the neighborhood rather than just overwhelm it, because I do think that's a nice addition to your neighborhood. I'm going to move on to a question. Looks like Donna Bailey's got her hand raised.
Yes, as a CAC chair, former CAC chair, you know, we did so many different things to just try and educate and enlighten the people in our community. But, you know, the biggest issue that we had was, you know, trying to have balanced development, you know, not too much, not too little, and to make it a win-win for everyone. And now that the CACs aren't there, there's so much lost. And it's, you watch council and some of these projects, they take so long because the applicant hasn't really been very engaged with the community to come up with real conditions, and it just takes so much longer, whereas previously most of that was worked out before it even went to the planning commission, because it was important. The developers had an incentive to try and work with the CAC, because that was one of the things that the planning commission and council actually asked for. What was the CAC vote and why? You know, there were a lot of other things, and it is very time consuming. We're working with a rezoning right now, and I'm so glad I'm retired, because, you know, the developers they have paid land use attorneys. We're just, you know, a bunch of volunteers trying to make it work. And that is another real positive. What the CACs did was they shared that community knowledge. That's all.
Mike, we've had a lot of activity in the chat, and I just want to highlight some of the information. Bob Gary says that we need to be more involved in the city elections. Unfortunately, the mayor and council got the 2021 elections postponed for 13 months, which is why we won't be voting until November of 2022. Let's be sure to step up this year. There's an FYI by James Harvey. Wake County primary election is May 17th of 22. Absentee ballots can be requested at the North Carolina State Board of Elections.gov. I also have some comments about how, from Donna Bailey, the developers will only do the minimum requirements unless directed by council. The majority of this council, especially Mayor Baldwin, are financially supported by developers and land use attorneys. They really don't care about community benefits. We need to elect people who actually care about the residents of Raleigh. We have Steph, and she says developers should not have an entitlement to rezonings. The rezoning should only be approved if there are adequate community benefits, which can include space, parks, affordability, etc. In today's council meeting, the mayor asked for a report on how they could build in the watershed. We have Wanda Gilbert Coker. Upgraded parks are used to gentrify the Black community. Examples are Chavis Park and Dix Park. Steph says, everyone agrees we need more housing, but not to the detriment of our water supply. Donna says, until we stop cutting down trees and knocking down naturally occurring affordable housing, Raleigh is going backward for housing and the environment. And from Larry Helfont, he wanted to respond to Betsy's comment about Montecito rezoning does not have any detail or developer associated with it. It is just a rezoning to change building height from 3-story to 5-story. No community benefit other than density at market rate. And then we had a couple of questions. One was from Wah. If mansions are being put in place of torn down houses, how does that address the affordable housing crisis? Which is a great question. And we also had a question from Josh Bradley. Is it legal to use ADUs as Airbnbs? If so, they will only bring gentrification. And it looks like we have Lisa, and then Lisa Hewitt and William Twitty. We'll go in that order. Is that okay, Mike?
Absolutely. Lisa, you want to unmute?
Yep, thank you. So I've been attending a number of these meetings and have spoke ahead in front of the city council a lot with regard to affordable housing. And one of the things that they do that they are timid about is inclusionary zoning. And I spoke with Commissioner Fox from the Planning Commission, and she rightfully stated that being in Raleigh, the city council has the General Assembly in their backyard, and they are a bit wary of doing things to piss them off. She mentioned one thing that I think this government was trying to rezone some property, and the city council at that time came back and said, we're not going to approve that. And the General Assembly came back and basically carved out a 6-block radius around the state capitol and said, this is our land and we will do whatever we want. So that was just an example of kind of the retaliatory nature of the General Assembly. So I say that because of the inclusionary zoning issue. And rather than, we all agree we need more affordable housing. We all agree that there are more tear downs of and lack of respect for preserving naturally occurring affordable housing. So let's do something about it instead of just continue to complain and talk about it. I'm going to post a link in the chat, which is a bill that went to the Senate during last session in 2021 about including inclusionary zoning in North Carolina law. I don't know what the situation is with that. I have seen some other drafts of bills. I don't know if it didn't meet the deadline, or I don't know if it's being followed up on. But perhaps this is something that Livable Raleigh can help to spearhead, and we can start talking to those senators and finding out what it takes to pass a bill like this.
Lisa, we're going to go to William next, but my casual observation on what you were asking is I think the General Assembly we're currently dealing with is a pretty tough case to deal with at this point in time, but hopefully we can make progress.
But until we can require the city council to work with developers on affordable housing, we're just going to continue to complain and we're not going to get any progress done. So I'm just putting forward an action that might move this situation forward.
I agree.
Thank you.
William, you want to unmute yourself? And
yes. Oh, thanks, Michael. First of all, thanks to Livable Raleigh for hosting this session. I'm a proponent of respectable public comments as well as engagement. The focus of my talk really is going to be briefly, but the focus of my talk is really on just the increase in housing and real estate pricing. I posted this week on Nextdoor an article that was written in the New York Times. It's dated February the 11th, and it has gotten quite a bit of traction. And I really wanted it to. I really wanted to kind of stir up some discussion. And it have gotten a lot of discussion. So if any of you are on Nextdoor, you might want to check it out. But what the article focused on are the boroughs in New York. And of course, we're in Raleigh. We're not at the size of the boroughs in New York, but we are facing increasing real estate prices. The article looked at Q4 2019 versus Q4 2021. And being an early resident here to Raleigh, I moved here in 2016, and I'm finally kind of starting to get myself acclimated to the things of Raleigh. I do have a master's degree in city and regional planning. So I think it's time for me to start serving. And my primary focus is affordable housing. That's my primary focus. And I just kind of want to hear if there's anyone out here in the audience that can speak to what the city, not only the city council, but also Wake County, because I believe in partnership. And it doesn't have to be public. It could be public-private partnership. Because that's one thing I learned in city planning. You really just want to get something that works for the city. So if we have to work with the developers to make it happen in terms of affordable housing, let's do that. Let's put all the cards on the table. I think is at a situation here in Raleigh right now where we do need all hands on deck. So I would just like to hear from the audience, what has been some of the strategies or strategic plans that have been put in place to kind of address affordable housing and also address just the continuous increase in real estate prices here in the Triangle. And again, thanks to Livable Raleigh for holding this forum.
Mr. Switty, I think the biggest question is, what do you consider affordable housing?
That's a good question. That is a good question. And I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, you know, the job I have where I live, and again, I live on Lake Boone, and I'm just fortunate enough, my wife and I, we're fortunate enough that we can pay the rent. I mean, it's high. I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, if anyone knows about Ridge Road, this is a high rent district. So I knew that coming in, but I thank God that I'm in a financial situation and I have the type job where I can afford it. So Ms. Hunter, I really don't know the answer to that question. I do know though, people that live in Southeast Raleigh, they can't even consider, and I'm not saying everyone, but the people that I came in contact with when I had a teaching session at Southeast Raleigh, I know a lot of those residents could not live where I'm living. So I guess to answer your question is, I gotta answer your question with the question. What does the city of Raleigh consider equitable? That's the question. Because again, there are some areas that people just can't afford to live in, and they probably never had the opportunity to live in certain areas. And then I think also with the COVID pandemic, that has created some issues too. And that's what the article was kind of focusing on, the New York Times article. It was due to the COVID pandemic as well.
Well, Wanda, you're an expert on some of the questions he just raised. Do you want to talk about AMI and different levels and what the city does?
Well, that's why I asked the question. HUD has a definition and breaks down the different AMIs to what is affordable, whether it's 30, 60, or 80% of the AMI. But when you look at the income of those different levels, it reflects back to exactly what you said, Mr. Twitty, that people in the lower AMIs couldn't even afford to live in the part of the city that you live in. So when you say affordable housing, it's affordable to who, in reference to what affordable housing is. And you have to look at the way that the the way that people take affordable housing and misconstrue the concept. Because, you know, as long as they say, as long as you're not paying more than 30% of your income, then your housing is affordable to you, you know? And so that makes your housing affordable, you know, regardless of, you know, what level that is, you know. And then you have to think about it in that manner. Are you talking about the lowest of the AMIs, or are you talking about the higher of the AMIs? And then you have to think about also how living wages, not even living wages, thriving wages have not increased. And then you think about the projects that are coming here, such as Apple and Google, who are raising the housing prices, and the people that have lived here or are the foundation of here, or this is where they have lived, can no longer afford to live where they have lived because they have been priced out. And it's the same for people that are coming here. I've heard of different people who've had jobs with good incomes that have come here and find housing because it doesn't stay on the market long enough. And so it's just affordable housing is a big, I mean, there's so many layers to it. The county is pouring money into trying to do some partnerships. Some cities or some municipalities are a whole lot more forward and working with them. And I can't say the same. I can't say that about this city. So, but the county is taking some initiatives for affordable housing, but I cannot say that the city is working alongside them in alignment.
Thank you.
And Mike, we had a couple in the comments, the chat. James Harvey.
Hey, James, well, that graphic went away. I don't know who put that up, but that was a very interesting graphic. You know, we're talking AMI, and it's this kind of puts a face to the numbers, I think. If everybody can see that, I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can.
And Wanda, with the city's affordable housing efforts, what's the AMI that they've been targeting for, like, with the recent housing bond?
Let's see. Without pushback, their housing bond was focused on 80%. With the pushback that we did push forward, the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition, we did get them down to 60% of the AMI. And most of the concern was that it's too expensive to focus on 30% of the AMI, but those are people too, who deserves not to have housing. So it's a matter of where your humanity is and how you feel about the fellow man. Everybody deserves to have housing. So when we pushed back, they did move the needle a little bit, like I said, to 60% of the AMI. But 30 is 30. The city did a survey, and 30% of the AMI was the greatest need. 30% of the AMI in the city of Raleigh was the greatest need. And if you do a survey and your survey comes back and tells you what your greatest need is, then you know what your priority should be.
Great. Okay. I'm sorry, did we have somebody come in with a question that I interrupted?
Oh, we had James Harvey, who was in the chat. He typed stack, and then followed by Josh Bradley.
Okay.
Hi, I'm actually Linda Harvey. I'm using my husband's computer. Sorry about that. And I just wanted to thank everybody who's in attendance. I was hoping that maybe Donna Bailey and or Mike Lindsay could speak to and maybe remind everybody who's here on the chat about what happened to the CACs in Raleigh. And is there any hope to be able to bring back, I know for our CAC it was over 50 years old, to bring these back, or is that just something that can happen with the new elections and to get new folks on the council? For me, I don't have all the statistics, but I feel like since the council sort of did that, it seems fairly clandestine vote at the time, if I'm remembering correctly, kind of a backdoor vote in the evening one night or something. And I feel like since that's happened, I feel like the development has just gone even crazier, and more people seems like ourselves seem so concerned with what we see every day and drive by, and more red cones and beep beep trucks. And I feel like it, you know, I think the council really, there was a method to their madness to remove the CACs. And I don't usually speak in conspiracies, but it seemed that that was a goal of theirs. And since those were eradicated, the development has just gone bananas. My perspective is from somebody who grew up in California, and I lived in Cary for over 20 years and watched all of that development. But as a Californian, both in Southern California and as a California and then Northern California, my husband and I are, it's very reminiscent what we're watching happening now in Raleigh as to what happened in California. And developed were just sort of allowed to run amok, and roads and infrastructure were not brought up to speed to deal with all the new housing developments, and you know, thus the jokes about the California freeways and roads. So I am concerned for Raleigh's high growth. You know, growth can be good, but if the planning doesn't go in advance, then you're just dealing with all the negative aspects of the high growth because planning wasn't done appropriately. So anyway, I'll go off now and mute myself, but I thought that the history of the CACs quickly and what happened to those, and maybe what we could do to try to bring them back, might be valuable to this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, well, since you said my name and Donna's, I'm going to jump in. And if Donna wants to follow up, that's great. First of all, as you may or may not know, CACs were created by Raleigh's first African-American male mayor almost 50 years ago. And they were basically set up as a way for Raleigh residents to have a say in what was going on instead of it always being the good old boy network. It was very progressive. And we've had a long history, I think, of positive activity. We're still active, even though the city defunded us, but I got to say, we're still getting city staff people to show up at our meetings. The city did create a new community engagement office. They hired a new manager for it last year, Taisha Hinton, who has been showing up and listening to us. And I think most of us think she's very good, and she's now got an employee working with her. So I'm optimistic that I don't care whether we call them citizen advisory councils. I mean, maybe we call them resident something, whatever, but resident might be a more appropriate term than citizen. And I'm hopeful that we're going to we make progress before the election, and then certainly the upcoming elections an opportunity to elect people who respect grassroots organizations and truly want to hear from the average Joe rather than people, wealthy individuals who used to call all the shots in Raleigh.
I just want to, you know, CACs were not perfect. One of the big problems was the size inequity, and that was going to be dealt with. But they did so much good, and they provided so much information. And actually just today at the city council meeting, they were talking about online participation and Zoom meetings and things like that. And the numbers they're getting are pitiful, really pitiful. And, you know, that was one of the things that they said about the CACs, but our numbers and the information we got out was much bigger. Some of the stronger CACs are, but unfortunately, I think there's one CAC left in Black Raleigh that is still meeting. Otherwise, the minorities in those neighborhoods, what they were designed for, totally lost. And so, and the only way we're going to get anything like a CAC back is to get a different council, and particularly a different mayor. That was one of Mayor Baldwin's agenda items, was to get rid of CACs. She didn't like the influence that the CACs had with development.
And I'll point out, speaking of strength and participation, the Mordecai CAC met the other night, and they maxed out the number of participants that could join. Their Zoom account allowed 100 people to attend, and they blew that out of the water with a lot of other people trying to sign in. So very strong CAC. In our Hillsborough Way CAC, Donna used to be our chair. I'm now the chair, and Donna did a great job for years and great leadership, and she's still doing it with dealing with zoning issues. So.
Mike, we had Josh Bradley was up next.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Okay, no, the current council talks a lot about it, not the city attorney telling them that they can't include low-cost housing in zoning negotiations. But I can almost guarantee that if we get a council in there that will not do any rezoning until such time as inclusionary zoning is passed, that will put pressure on the state government to allow to pass an inclusionary zoning, because we can't luxury housing our way out of this affordability crisis. And if you're looking at people that like servers, people that work in hotels, and people that work at gas stations, people work at grocery stores, they need to live here. They need to get to work. People like having those people at work. And unfortunately, there's nowhere for anybody that has a job like that really to live in the city anymore, because you can't find even a studio apartment for less than $1,000 unless you really look. So, and as far as affordability, I think we did a calculation that if you made minimum wage, affordable housing is like $233 a month. So, I mean, we need to focus on getting the foundation for the city to make sure that we've got people in the city that that does things for the community, whether it be city workers that take the trash or manage the water system. They need to be able to afford to live close by in the city, especially since our public transit right now is not obviously a priority. So we need to make sure that we have the ability and the infrastructure and the housing to take care of people that are providing the basic services that a lot of us do and a lot of us need. You know, when it comes down to it, don't worry about missing middle housing, because like the mobile upper middle class is going to do fine without extra money. You know, they might not get as fanciest places they want, but they will get a place. The problem is people that are working, the workers, the working class in the city has nowhere to go except out. And at the same time, people are saying no one wants to work here anymore on all the doors, is because no one can afford to work there anymore. So I just think it would be a decent idea if we get people that are running for these city council positions to not approve any rezoning until such time as they give us the ability to rezone with environmental and low cost housing. Not affordable is such a generic term. We need it for work, housing for people that work for a living instead of the bourgeois. Over.
Josh, what you just articulated, a lot of people are thinking. One of the comments that came in before this meeting, a person stated the following: I'm also concerned that labor shortages in our city and the service industries will be permanent as our leaders allow affordable neighborhoods to be destroyed and replaced with expensive apartments, expensive homes, or expensive mixed-use buildings. It is disgraceful that our firefighters, police, restaurant workers, teachers cannot afford to live in Raleigh any longer.
And Josh, I think that the missing
go ahead, Juana.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the missing middle was really a mistermed, and it's a misconception, because they're not talking about economics. They're not talking about how much money you make. They're talking about the infrastructure. So they're talking about duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes that we don't see a lot of.
Okay. Yeah, Wanda, thanks for that clarification. That's absolutely right. Missing middle is about architecture and form. Was somebody? Okay. About architecture and form, not about income. And I'll point out, the neighborhood I live in, Cameron Park, has missing middle kind of architecture in it already. That's been here for decades, but I would not call Cameron Park very affordable. I don't think I could afford to live here if I didn't already live here. We have a question from, or a comment from Jennifer. If you want to unmute yourself.
Mike, before you go
Sorry.
there, we have Tim Niles first.
Okay.
I just wanted to address the question about what inclusionary zoning is. Inclusionary zoning that is illegal in North Carolina is if council were to demand or require a condition for affordable housing in a zoning request in order to approve it. But the city council does not need to use inclusionary zoning or even legalize it in order to negotiate with developers for including affordable housing in their rezoning request. A zoning request is basically a request from a property owner for an increase in their entitlement. No one deserves an increase in entitlement automatically. And there's no reason that, for example, a city can use density bonuses. They can put together a plan. I think this city has put one together in the past. When someone comes and says, I'd like to increase my zoning entitlement, point them to the density bonus plan. You want more height? Go look at the plan. It's right there. Come back with your details of where you want to fall in that increased bonus density. There's no reason any one of the members of city council can't tell an applicant, I don't see enough community benefit in your zoning application to justify the increase in entitlement you're asking for. Go back to the drawing board, come back again. I didn't say one word about you must come back with affordable housing. I didn't do anything illegal, but I think they'd get the idea.
And Tim, I believe that the previous city council did that with one of Kane's projects near Capitol Boulevard.
I believe it was Pokey Hollow.
Yes. Okay, Jennifer?
Hi there. Thank you to everyone. And thanks, Tim. It's nice to see you in person. He let me publish those 2 blogs for Livable Raleigh, and I'm so grateful. I actually wondered if it was okay if I talked about 2 ordinances that are important, that have some text changes to them. And hopefully I can piggyback right from what Joshua Bradley was saying about equity and zoning and affordability, because I think this sort of segues right into that. What's happening with some of these text changes to ordinances, and I was just a Joe Schmo who had no idea about what text changes were. And so what's really interesting is that all these really big changes are completely going under the radar with the city council by being called text changes. Something that I don't think regular citizens are aware of that have so much impact. But anyway, what these do, there's TC 1121, which deals with parking and was just actually passed out of the Planning Commission. And another one is TC 1221, which deals with live, work, and accessory commercial units, which is basically having commercial businesses in residential zones. Now, we know that residential zoning in Raleigh is not just strictly houses. We're talking about renters and owners and apartments and single family homes and duplexes, but we are talking about residential areas as opposed to commercial areas. That's the big difference. And what the city is proposing to do and what they sent to the text change committee that I've been following these meetings is they want to expand these live work businesses so that, again, we're getting into multi-use zoning within residential areas. So you can open businesses. This has already been around, but this completely expands it. So you can add retail and add businesses to include, and this is in the first draft, restaurants, firearm sales, vaping sales, tobacco sales, alcohol sales. And just so you know, from all of those things, none of those are regulated by the city. They cannot legally be regulated by the city. So they're quite problematic as it is. And another thing is that they wanted these businesses to now be able to operate from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And just so you know, for people who live in downtown neighborhoods that have public permitting, like I do in Cameron Park, that's from 8 to 5. So already you're creating sort of a competition for on-street parking. And this is a citywide ordinance and citywide proposal. So it actually is totally, there's no equity to it at all, because anyone who has a homeowners association is protected. Anyone who's in a condo is protected. Anyone who has a large tract of land where you're not near another house is protected. The ones who aren't protected are those who live in downtown older neighborhoods, don't have garages, don't have parking pads, areas like East Raleigh in addition. And it's just very problematic. Now, some people in the text change committee did propose, you know, changing some of those hours and making them from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The Raleigh Police Department says that crimes go up, you know, statistically by the hour that it gets darker at night. So, you know, I mean, having these businesses open till 11 p.m., you could see how problematic that is, and noise pollution. And I mean, I could just go on, but the main thing is that on top of this, they're eliminating the need for parking. So now businesses have to provide parking, and with the new text changes, they don't have to provide parking at all for their customers, for their employees. And it sort of overlaps with TC 1121, which is the parking that has already passed out of the planning committee, which has the same thing. It says we don't have to provide parking for businesses. And in fact, if there's any problem with commercial areas around neighborhoods, we're just going to let the neighborhoods take care of it with spillover parking, which means that we have to absorb any commercial parking from bars and restaurants. So, I mean, this is something that's, you know, very interesting. I was trying to figure out the origin of it, and it seems to be that the city commission says they want to be, if you look at some of the at-large members and their websites, they're very much against residential zoning. And they like to post a lot of articles about Seattle and all sorts of different cities. And, you know, I was an environmental studies major, and I did, you know, work at a master's in public administration. I understand all these issues, but, you know, we're talking about the reality of living in our city, and also the equity of how this would affect all different kinds of neighborhoods. So I think it's also, just to go back to what Joshua said, it's expensive to live downtown, and it's amazing if you can be able to have a house where you can ride your bicycle to work and have that luxury. But does that represent all Raleigh residents? I mean, I think people who can't afford to do that and have to live in the suburbs, or have to live 45 minutes out and they have to drive in because they can't afford to live in the city, does that not discriminate against their situation? And I mean, they could be pro-environment too, but they have families, and it's just not practical for everyone. It seems like it is, it's just something that has to be addressed immediately. I mean, it's still in the text change committee phase. It should be voted on by the council in March. So sorry to ramble on. I could go on and on about these because I've been following it. I don't want to bore you all, but I just think it's a really important issue.
Jennifer, you become a bit of an expert on these two text changes and how they overlap and collide potentially, and they are modifying it. You did say that they dropped the possibility for like gun sales out of a home. Did I hear that correctly, or is?
Well, it was proposed by the chair of the text change committee, who's really great. she's Blaney Cheng Miller, that we do away with that. And also that we do away with, the city had actually proposed that not only would we have signage for business, but that we add lighting. I mean, they're literally trying to make this, I mean, it's bizarre, like a totally commercial district. And I think people who are reasonable, like I am, I say, you know, it's fine to have certain home businesses and that's normal. But if you're going to be, you know, making this exactly like a commercial district, and also the most important part of this is they wanted to get rid of special use permits, which means, talk about equity, absolutely no residents, nobody is allowed to be involved in the process. So right now, with the current special use permitting, you know, there has to be an evidentiary hearing, and neighbors who live within 100 feet of the property have to be notified, so they're allowed to comment, and the city has to look at this. If we get used to special use permitting, it's going to be harder to get a backyard fence than it is to open a commercial business. So those changes were proposed in committee, but that does not mean that the city, that they're going to leave the committee like that. And it also does not mean that the council will have to abide by that at all. We have to be very vocal about this.
Yeah. The special use permit is really critical. In Cameron Park, we had a situation years ago where a neighbor was going to apply for a special use permit to sell guns out of their house. And I think what stopped it was the outrage that developed on our Cameron Park listserv. And ultimately, it did not go through, but there were lots of heated conversations about it. And of course, like you were just saying, we would have had no idea about it if the city didn't require a special use permit.
Exactly. That's the worst part of it. And the most, I mean, that's what makes it unequitable. I mean, because no one is going to have a say in the process. And the other thing is, none of this is regulated. So let's say there was no special use permit and the firearms that got approved and strangers are coming till 11 p.m. to buy firearms next to you. The only thing you could do is complain to the city afterwards. There's absolutely no regulation at all. They cannot enforce anything. All you have to do. So it's interesting, you know, you're going to have neighbor complaining against neighbor, and it's going to create just, you know, we have these peaceful neighborhoods we live in, and that would be completely gone if you did away with special use permitting.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for staying on top of this. You've educated a lot of us.
Oh, thank you. I'm passionate about it. I stumbled upon it and I couldn't believe it. So I appreciate all your support and everybody here. You're all fantastic. Thanks.
Tim, you had a question or a comment?
I had a question. I want to tie two things together. There was an earlier question in the chat talking about whether ADUs, accessory dwelling units, or granny flats can be used as short-term rentals or Airbnbs, and yes, they can. What I want to tie this, though, directly to what Jennifer was just talking about, because originally when the Planning Commission approved ADUs, they had inserted a requirement in it, a restriction in it that stopped you from using ADUs as an Airbnb. The City Council took that restriction away and allowed ADUs to be used as Airbnb. So even though, as Jennifer was just saying, the Planning Commission currently is thinking about saying we should not include gun sales in a neighborhood shop, doesn't mean that just because that's what they proposed to the council, that the council will go along with it. They certainly didn't go along with the restrictions that the Planning Commission wanted to place on ADUs.
Okay. Hey, I'm not seeing Wanda on my screen right now. You still here, Wanda?
I sure am.
Okay.
I had to wait for a second.
Okay.
But next we have, looks like Cole just raised their hand, Cole McMullen.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of talk about ranked choice voting in the chat, and I also wanted to talk about proportional representation, particularly given the redistricting process that's currently happening right now. As far as districting goes, my understanding is that there's kind of two issues at play. One is having minority majority districts where a majority of the people in a district are made up of a minority and can get representation at the district level. And then another one is making sure those districts are drawn such that representation will be equal until the next redistricting process, which probably won't be till 2030. And those are both two very challenging things, I think, to do with a district voting process. And that's where I think proportional representation really addresses that issue and kind of takes the problem of gerrymandering out of the equation. So the way it works is, just for example, let's say if there was an additional at-large city councilor added to city council, so you had a total of 3. To win an at-large city council race, you would need to hit a critical threshold of the vote, which would be 25% of the vote. So when you go to the polls to vote for your at-large city councilor, you can rank them. So this would be a combination of ranked choice voting and proportional representation. If the candidate that you rank first has well over 25% and they want a seat, then part of your vote can go to your second choice because your first choice candidate already met the threshold. On the flip side, let's say you voted for a candidate that wasn't very popular, like they had the least amount of votes out of everyone running and they got eliminated. So what'll happen to your vote is it'll go to your second choice on the ballot, so on and so forth, until you have 3 candidates that have at least 25% of the vote. So it is a complex voting process. It would take time to implement. There would have to be robust community engagement to really get the broad support that it would need to be implemented, and not to mention the support you would need to get from the General Assembly. But the benefits of it are, one, you never really have to worry about demographics shifting from one side of the city or from one part of the city over the course of 10 years. 2, you never have to worry about drawing districts in an equitable manner. It'll just be proportional. The vote itself will be proportional every election period. And then 3, it eliminates the need for a runoff while you still have the benefit of a single transferable vote. And then you could still maintain a certain number of district councilors if you wanted to, and then use ranked choice voting where you rank your candidates. And then the first candidate that is able to get 50% plus 1 of the vote wins the seat. So I think these are ideas that don't really have broad coverage. Not a lot of people know about them, but I would really like to see them discussed, like in the city council terms study group. I think they discuss some good topics, and they can only get to so much in a single term, as it were. But if that study group were to be reconvened, every 2, 3, 4 years or so, I would like to see these topics discussed by them, and then to bring the community and engage in that topic. So thank you.
Thanks, Cole. Yeah, I wish we had ranked choice voting instead of what we're going to have this fall, which is a plurality vote. There'll be no chance of a runoff, so we could have somebody representing us who did not get that many votes potentially, which is unfortunate. But, and I think I've been told that what we're going into this fall favors incumbents because of that. Wanda, have you spotted any other comments or questions coming in?
I do not have any hands raised. There was a comment. Let me see if I can get it. From Bruce Mammal. He said, unintended consequences. Some neighborhoods hire a lawyer and draft an HOA to buffer ruthless council decisions. Neighborhoods with no HOA become fair game for investors and all the changes. Text change 12, ACU's businesses in the neighborhoods will pit neighbors against each other and utterly ignores existing zoning opportunities. TC 20, missing middle, carving up zoning to create housing, just fobs all the issues into neighborhoods, hoping homeowners take the bait. Cost of material, buildings, land, square footage, etc. mask the true cost of affordable housing. The UDOs, tiny houses, etc. All of it just adds up to ignoring all of the efforts for decades regarding zoning, small area plans, comp plans, and UDOs, etc. And let's see. And then Cole just made his comments about the ranked choice voting and gave a rundown on what that is. So is there anybody else out there want to raise your hand or have some comments that you would like to talk about?
Excuse me, Wanda? Wanda?
Yes.
Sorry, I had put Stack in the chat. I was hoping maybe Jennifer could enlighten us on the rest of the timing of the text change proposals. The parking mitigation apparently already made it through planning, and I think isn't the next step to go back to the city council. And what can all of us do except just talk to the city council and write in, and can we attend the meeting or go through Zoom? What can we do to engage about these text changes? Thank you.
Jennifer, can you chime in for us, please?
Yes, hi, thank you so much for wanting to help. So on February 8th, TC 1121, so that's the one related to parking. And something else I didn't mention, that it's a huge parking bill that's going to be a nightmare for parking enforcement. The main thing it does is that it tells builders they're not required to provide any parking at all for their new developments, which is like outrageous. I've never heard anything like that before. But as far as that goes, I was just focused on the section of the commercial businesses and residential neighborhoods not having to provide parking. I had sent letters multiple times to people on the Planning Commission. And I think that at this point, probably writing an email to either all, to your city council member or else all of them at once would be a great idea. I have to find out when that's actually coming up before the city council meeting. And I'm following closely, but I don't have a date yet on when the next text change committee meeting is on TC 1221. I think it's just going to be maybe going to the Planning Commission next. So if there's a way, I think Livable Raleigh probably posts all those dates, correct? Or if you want me to do that.
Yeah, this is Steph. If you go to the Livable Raleigh website on our calendar, you will find all the meetings, any information that the city has put out, we will put there with links to the meetings and stuff. We also send out an email every Friday morning with highlights of the upcoming meetings for the week and other information about other developments that are under consideration. So if you're not on our mailing list and you want to get on it, you can sign up on our website, or you can email livableraleigh@gmail.com and we'll sign you up.
But yeah, yes, and thank you. But emailing, again, there's one group email for the Planning Commission and one for the city councilors. And if you just do that for both, it would be fantastic. Even if you say you oppose the text changes as is, or if you want to put more details in it, that'd be great.
Yeah, and Shane has just put the email addresses in the chat.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, I think we're gonna, we got a couple more here. Before Bill, I'm looking in the chat and I see Joshua Bradley wrote the typed in stack. Joshua, do you have something you want to talk about?
I've already talked, so if I should only talk once,
sorry.
then I can stop back. I mean, that was before. I've got something else, but I don't want to push anybody out or make it go too long, so I'll leave y'all the decision whether you want me to ramble again.
Well, yeah, we appreciate what you have to say. Bill, you want to say something?
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about affordable housing. I think somebody posted a screen up that showed various incomes that qualified you. There was an interesting article by CNN, and I've just posted it to chat, and it's got a URL. And it looks at least at 100, if not more, metro areas, of which Raleigh is one. And you can choose your metro area and type in salaries and you can see how many houses are available and that you'll be able to potentially afford. And as you start looking at that 15 to 25,000, there aren't any in Raleigh out of, I think, about 1,200 homes on the market. So take a look at that. It's kind of an interesting, I won't say how accurate it is. It's been recently updated. I think it's probably pretty accurate, but you know, it depends on location. And but you can just put in your income and you can begin to see how difficult it would be for anyone with an AMI of 30 to afford to buy anything. So that's it.
Okay, Josh, did you want to say something, or are you good?
If I have time, I've got just one other thought.
Okay.
And it involves the Shelley Lake rezoning where they're putting the luxury condos. I live in a townhouse nearby that I bought in 2006, back when they didn't care if you had good credit or not. And the price of my house is more than double. The value of my house is more than doubled, and people say that's a good thing, but it's really not, because of the majority of my neighbors, at least my direct neighbors, there are renting. So when my property value goes up, maybe I might sell my house for more, not that I could afford to buy anything else, but it pushes the rent up to all my neighbors, and I like my neighbors. Like we've got a nice community there. And when it comes down to it, if all the property values rise because the gentrifiers coming in and because the luxury condos that are tearing down half the trees at Shelley Lake pushes my home value up, it's not worth it to me, because like, as I said, I've got good neighbors, and more than half the neighbors in my building rent, and I don't want them to be priced out of the neighborhood. So there are a lot of people that will be like, well, it's good if property values goes up if you own a house. And on some degree, maybe, even though they've more than doubled my home estimate, I still can't afford to live anywhere else in Raleigh, which is decent. I guess I could borrow against it or whatnot, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the fact that I've got a good neighborhood and good neighbors due to the fact that, you know, some gentrifiers want to come in and, you know, make everything super fancy, and it's just not worth it to me. And it might not be super related, but I mean, when rezoning, when people try to say that it increases the property values around the rezoning, that's just gentrifier talk for saying we're going to push out the renters. So over.
All right, thanks, Josh. And I guess the last comment or question will be Larry's, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to put out for everybody to let you know that the text change for the missing middle, which covers a lot, it picks up where TC5 left off and pushed everything that it missed into the missing middle. But those discussions are still open, and the next meeting for that, which you can sign up for, is on March 1st. And the deadline to get that out of committee to the Planning Commission, get it out, is mid-April. So you have a lot of time to submit comments. And what I'd watch for, those of us, many of us that live in R4 neighborhoods, flag lots in particular, and duplexes. So I get that, I can't say duplexes, townhomes are now permitted in R4 neighborhoods. So be careful. Go ahead, look at it, comment on it, and see if you can get some justification for making those changes. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we were wrapping up and I was seeing some messaging. There was a graphic somebody was talking about putting up. I don't know if we want to end on that or not, but thanks for everybody participating tonight. I think there was a lot of interesting information shared, and I'm going to turn this over to Susan.
Thank you, Mike. I think we would like to see that graphic just because it's a lot of new information. And then we'll have a few comments before closing. As you can see, the graphic on the left is the history of the donations received by each of these council members and the mayor in the 2019 election. And we wanted everyone to know that based on the records, Mayor Baldwin has already raised $500,000 for the November 2022 election. The point here that I want to make in closing is that every vote is going to have to count, and every person is going to have to vote that does not believe that this council is in doing the things that are in the best interest of the city and the people who live here. And I hope the people power can overcome the money. And I hope that I'm sure we will be deluged with misinformation and mailers that will make us want to throw up. But we have got to try to get to the grassroots and get everybody who is concerned about Raleigh and the future out to vote. Okay, so now in closing, I want to thank you for all these inspirational comments and questions. This is a first experience for us in this sort of open format, and I hope you feel that it was as fulfilling for you as it was for us. I want to keep you all involved with Livable Raleigh. I hope you'll stay connected to us. First thing you should do is make sure you sign up and send us your email so that you can be on our mailing list and receive our weekly mailings. The second thing is I want to let you know that we're going to continue to try to inform and educate our Raleigh residents so that we can make informed decisions at the ballot box. We are also an all volunteer organization, and we would appreciate any donations as we head into this election year. We want to be able to make our voice heard, and our donations are going to have to play a big role in this. You can do that by going to our website at www.livableraleigh.com and seeing the donation button, or you can send us a check at our mailbox, which is P.O. Box 6404 Raleigh 27628. Thank you very, very much, Mike and Wanda, for keeping us on the straight and narrow tonight. Thank you all for staying with us right to the very end. This is the best retention we've ever had for a meeting, and we thank you very, very much. We'll be back at it again with your help. Have a good evening.